Welcome back to the Frozen Take. Today we will be talking about episode 3, and specifically we'll be breaking down the NHL Draft. Sorry about this video, I wish I would have got it out a little bit earlier. But we'll start off with the Atlantic Division, then we'll move into the Metropolitan, the Pacific Division, and the Central Division. The biggest thing that we're going to do today is we're going to really break down how each team did. We won't go super in depth with every pick they made, otherwise we'd be here for hours. But I'll briefly go over a letter grade A, B, C, D, or F, depending on how I thought they did. And we'll see if I like their picks, if I think they could have done better. And we'll try to keep this video to a little bit of a shorter one. Now let's get into it. Starting off with the Atlantic Division, let's go to the Boston Bruins. I gave them a B+. Personally, I thought they had a really good draft. They got James Hagens in the first round, that great value with the 7th pick. And overall, they just consistently made a lot of good picks. And they seem to maximize their value to an extent with every pick they had. And I think they were probably one of the better teams to have one of the better drafts out of all the teams in the NHL. Moving on now, we take a look at the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres, I gave them a C+. You know, they could have done better. They left some guys on the board that I thought could help fill holes in their roster. But they were able to get a few quality guys, which is what you need. If you can get 2-3 guys that turn out for you in every draft, you're kind of making out pretty well. And that's why I think the Buffalo Sabres get a C+, because I think they got maybe 2 guys, but in the end, they could have definitely done better. Now, moving on, let's take a look at the Detroit Red Wings, and I gave them a B. Detroit is always one of those teams that they have a solid draft every year. It doesn't really ever seem to escape them. They're always finding guys overseas, in North America. And personally, their scouts, they have some of the best scouts in the league. And I think it's just another great draft in a long list of them for Detroit. So I think they get a B, and I definitely think they got like 3, maybe even 4 solid players that could become something. Some of their guys are going to need a little bit of time to develop, but overall, when they arrive, they should be stellar. Moving on now, we're taking a look at the Florida Panthers. And Florida is a team, I gave them an F. I thought they had a terrible draft. They didn't have a lot of great picks, and they're picking late in rounds that they did have picks because they won the Stanley Cup. But they won the Stanley Cup. When you win the Stanley Cup, you don't need to have a great draft because you're in the win now mode. And it's their window. They're going for it. Back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. If they have a bad draft, don't really matter for them. They're focusing right now. They're not looking down the road to the future. So I give them an F, but personally, I also think doesn't really matter for them. Their window's probably still 3-4 seasons that they could seriously contend for a cup. And that's why an F doesn't really bother me, and it shouldn't bother them. Good luck to the Florida Panthers moving forward. Moving on now, we take a look at the Montreal Canadiens. I gave them a C largely because they didn't address needs that I thought they would. When you go into a draft, I think sometimes there becomes moments where you're like, oh, we might need a defenseman, we might need a forward, and you just kind of end up having to take the guy with the best value. Say you really need a defenseman, but a forward's been falling in the draft, so you just take him because he's the best value. I understand when that happens, you got to take the guy with the best value, but there becomes a point where you need to start filling holes in your roster and going after guys, maybe reaching up 4 or 5, maybe even 10 picks to get the guy that better suits the needs of your team. And they kind of did this, and it just, I don't know. Or no, they kind of didn't do this, sorry. They should have done that, and instead they just kind of took the guy with the best value, which I don't know if that's going to work out for them in the long run. Hence the reason I give them a C. And we go to the Ottawa Senators. I gave them a C+, and largely because they took 2 goalies. I don't know why they're taking 2 goalies. Goaltending really isn't an issue for them, in my opinion. I think they could have used more scoring forwards. Defensively, they're a good team. Like, I don't think they need to be taking a ton of defensemen, but they could have used definitely some better forwards, take some chances on some big guys, maybe bolster the bottom six or get some really good scoring playmaking guys, bolster the top six. They didn't really seem to do that in my mind. Reason I give them in the C+. And we go to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I gave them an F. They didn't really do anything impactful at the draft. It was kind of disappointing. They got a really good roster. They had an early exit in the playoffs. I think if you're Tampa, like, you're thinking, it's a fluke, we'll get him next year. But at some point, their roster does start to get a little older here. And you think, how many good years do you have left? I think maybe once Vasilevsky runs out, you're kind of in trouble. But till that happens, I think they are still kind of in the win now mode. So an F, it's disappointing, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all for them. And moving on to the last team in the Atlantic Division, it is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I gave them a D. I think they missed on this draft. It wasn't a good one. And they are a team. They need guys like Mitch Marner left. You're losing guys that are impactful, and you need to have a prospect pool that will replace these big guys. Their draft position just reduced them from acquiring certain guys, but I don't think that's an excuse. I think they maybe should have went the route of having less picks, but getting more quality players. They didn't do that. I think they kind of got caught in no man's land. Tough day to be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Now, as we move on to the Metropolitan Division, we take a look at the Carolina Hurricanes. I gave them a C. Although they got some great forwards, which I really think will help out for them, their defense, I don't know, I would have liked to see them get 1-2 really solid defensemen. Even if they would have taken time to develop, I just think they didn't really fill that hole for them in the long run, which is why I give them a C. Moving on now, we take a look at the Columbus Blue Jackets. I gave them a B. They're a team that they just need a lot of guys to come make an impact for them, and I believe they got a lot of guys that can help out in the near future. They're going to take probably 2 to 3 seasons, but they should help just build a lot of depth and eventually propel them into the playoffs and give them some good runs in the not too distant future, which is why I think B, it's inappropriate, and it's a good draft for them. New Jersey Devils. I give them a D. They didn't really do anything exciting. They got a good roster. They've been battling injury issues. Their prospect pool's okay. I just think, it would have been nice for them to get one really cool, 2 really good guys, maybe 1 really good forward, 1 really good D that excites me. And they didn't really do that, which is why I give them a D. I think they just have a below average draft, and that's how it goes sometimes, don't get me wrong. And I hope they bounce back next year and their scouts do a little bit better job, and maybe they move up, move back, try to acquire more picks. They got to just do something different, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. We move into the New York Islanders. When you get the first overall pick, it's hard to screw it up, and they don't. They get an A+. They got all the right guys, and I love their draft. They made the most of their picks in the first round, and it just followed. When you make good picks, sometimes it can be contagious, and the right thing always goes right, and it just happened to them. It was just bang, 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 and they're just hitting on all of them, maximizing potential, maximizing draft pick value, and that's why I give them an A+. Great job from the Isles. Now we move on to the New York Rangers. B-. They got a lot of good guys with great potential. I think the New York Rangers are a tricky team in the sense that they kind of, when you look at their roster on paper, they're a win now kind of team. So to get guys that maybe can't make it to the NHL in a season is kind of concerning, because you're trying to push for a win now mentality with a little bit of an older roster. But I guess at the same time, they're setting themselves up for the future. I just worry that they're always going to be they're going to get back into the playoffs, and they're always just going to be a playoff team, not really a cup contender team. That's my issue for them. Now I move on to the Philadelphia Flyers. I give them A-. They got everyone they wanted. They get to be happy campers. And when you get everyone you wanted, it's a good draft. Like, they might not have gotten who you think was best, but they got who they believed was best. And that's why I give them A-. I think that's really respectable. Going out and making moves and getting who you want, that's how you build a winning team. And that's why I like the Flyers draft. And they get an A-. Now we move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Pittsburgh, this is a tricky team. They got an old roster. You know, you got guys like Malkin, Crosby, and you're not getting them a lot of support. Your draft's not that good. You don't get to really build a lot for the future. You take a reach on some guys. And I just think there was more appropriate picks they could have made with their positions in the draft that they didn't, leading me to give them a C+. And yeah, so I don't know what they're going to do going forward, but hopefully they figure something out. And I go to the Washington Capitals. I give them a B. Solid draft. They get a lot of solid players that can help them. 4 out of their 5 picks were awesome value. And overall, I don't really have too many negative things to say about the Caps. When you get 4 solid guys that can really come in and make an impact sometime pretty soon, you're making out kind of like a bandit in a sense. So great draft from the Caps. I want to start off the Central Division with the team with the new name, the Utah Mammoth. Personally, I have them at a C+ for the draft, and this is because in the early rounds, they were looking brilliant with some of their picks. I thought they were just doing a solid job, getting a lot of great quality guys. But as the later rounds went on, it was like, what are you doing? I was left scratching my head with some of their picks. Like, how could you do such a great job in the beginning and then just progressively get worse and worse and worse? And it's tough, which is why they get a C+. If they would have been more consistent, could have been a B+, but that's how it goes. Now we move on to the Chicago Blackhawks. I give them an A-. And this is because they finally got Connor Bedard some support. And, you know, they're starting to build around him. The team slowly becomes more and more dangerous as time goes on. And it gets me excited. I'm not a Blackhawks fan by any means, but I just think when you have a generational talent, please do not squander it. I want to see them be able to do the things everyone thought they could do at once upon a time. And with Antoine Frondel as their first selection in the first round, you know, they start to slowly doing that. They get Mason West. If this guy doesn't go play football and focuses all of his efforts on hockey, this is a guy that people are sleeping on. This is an elite talent that, you know, you get Bedard, Frondel, Mason West on a line or like running a power play, you are in trouble. These guys will eat you up. And that's why Chicago, just what a great draft. A- for you. We go to the Colorado Avalanche now, and I give them a C+. This is because I only like 2 of their picks. They had 2 good picks, and all the rest were lackluster for me. And this is a team where, I don't know, you think they're going to be really good. You got guys like Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon, so you think you don't need to really do much. But if you're not building a good prospect pool, when it comes to the trade deadline, you can't trade your prospects for good returns and help bolster your lineup come the deadline. Which is why I think if you're Colorado and you're missing in the draft, like, how are you going to get back to the Stanley Cup, right? You need guys to bolster the roster. You don't got a prospect pool. You got nothing to trade for. No leverage. I don't like Colorado's draft. C+. Maybe that's generous. I move on to the Dallas Stars now. They had a good playoff run. I gave them a C. You know, they had a great first pick, and then after that, they're all subpar in my opinion. Just, I don't know. Like, some of the teams that go further in the draft, you know, they get some subpar guys. I understand you're picking later in the round, but still, get someone who has high potential. Sometimes they're taking guys with the lowest floor. And what I mean by that is, like, you know what they're going to be. Like, they're not going to get any worse than this, and like, maybe they're a fringe NHLer right now where they could be in and out of the fourth line. But these teams, you better take a shot in the dark and go for like a guy in the top 6. Like, they signed Chase Wheatcroft as a undrafted player. The guy finished only second in points to only Connor Bedard. Like, that's a guy you take a chance on, and they had the right mentality. So I just wish they would make more moves like that more often in the draft. Take some shots, especially in the later rounds, because if you miss on them, it's not a big deal. Most of the time you don't hit on in rounds 5 through 7. Now moving on, we go to the Minnesota Wild. I give them a C-. They did nothing special. They got a few role players. That's about it. I don't really know what else to say. If you're a Minnesota Wild fan, I'm sorry for you. Maybe you like the draft, but I think not good. You didn't really get anything too impactful. So now moving on, we go to the Nashville Predators. They got a lot of quality players, which is what they need. They got to kind of turn the ship around. They have a lot of older guys they signed in free agency, making the team look like they were going to be really good, and then they weren't. So I think acquiring a lot of solid players in this year's draft is definitely going to help expedite things and get things back on the right track and help turn things around in the organization. So great job, Nashville. St. Louis, C+. Once again, they only had 3 picks, but they did the best they could with the 3 picks that they had. It helps grow their helps build quality in their prospect pool, but it doesn't help grow their prospect pool a bunch, right? So it's thin in that sense. You got great guys, but it's thin because if you lose them, then you kind of got nothing. And when I say lose them, like if you trade them away to try to go on a run in the playoffs. But I think St. Louis maximized potential. It's just tough to do a lot with 3 picks. With the Winnipeg Jets, I give them a C+. They were able to fill some holes, not every hole, which, I understand you can't always meet every need, but at least just goes back to taking a chance on some guys to help fill those holes. Even if they need like 5 years before they get to the NHL, at least if they're like 22 coming to the NHL, but they're finally fully developed and they're on the right track to becoming a good player, that's better than having a guy who's going to be a 4th liner his whole career, and that's all you get from him, right? Low-end role player. Going to the Pacific Division now, I think this division had the most interesting out of all of them because they had a lot of quality drafts from all the teams in it, really, except one, which we will get to. Now we look at the Anaheim Ducks in the Pacific Division, and we can see that they just got great value. They got some steals throughout the draft. They were able to meet a lot of needs, which is what they needed. This is a young team with a young core, and continuing to build on it and getting a guy like Roger McQueen later really helps out. He had some injuries, but don't sleep on him. That's what I've been saying. And in the later rounds, they got some guys they like, and I think they fill some holes. So overall, great job from the Ducks, and it'll be interesting to see what that team looks like going forward. Now we go to the Calgary Flames, and they probably had the biggest steal of the draft, Cullen Potter. This guy was the last pick in the first round, and I had him kind of in the low 20s, or maybe high teens even. Either way, it proves my point. This guy, quality player. He is a great skater. I got to watch him at the Calgary Flames development camp, and his shot's really good too. The only thing he needs to work on is defense, and I got to see all the other Calgary Flames prospects. I'm not a Flames fan, even though I live in Calgary. I personally don't really like the Flames, but I give respect. They got a big defenseman. He's 6'6" too, and I believe was the 3rd round. They also got Cole Renshie. They're getting a lot of good scorers, shutdown D-men. This is a team that they got literally everything they needed, and it's going to help propel them into the playoffs. And these guys are probably ready in about a season, maybe 2, which makes the Flames dangerous because that's when they're really going to be great and ready for the playoffs. Overall, A for the Calgary Flames. Now, on to the Calgary Flames rival, the other team in Alberta, the Edmonton Oilers, They got a D. They just didn't do a lot. I mean, you went to the Stanley Cup Finals, so that's great, but you didn't win, which is tough. and then you don't really do a lot in the draft. Eventually, your prospect pool bleeds dry. You don't have anyone. They had the decade of darkness. You'd hate to see them go into the decade of darkness again, especially if you're an Oilers fan. So if I was an Oilers fan, I'd be a little bit worried. I guess the one thing they did get was I think they drafted a goalie in the later round that looked decent. So they got that going for them. Maybe that turns into something in 4 or 5 seasons, but not anytime soon. He's not replacing Stuart Skinner for next season. Aiden Park, he was their last draft pick, and I actually think he was the best quality player they took. This is a hot take. A lot of people will disagree with it, but that's just what I think. Aiden Park was a great player, and I think he should have went earlier in this year's draft. Moving on now, I go to the Los Angeles Kings. I give them a B-. You know, they were set up in kind of a weird spot in the draft. Mark Yannetti, he's a great scout. He likes to move back in the draft because he feels like he's confident with a lot of guys. I didn't like their first round pick. They took a defenseman, Henry, and he was just, I don't know, Henry Brushnevich, and I just think they could have got someone better. I don't think a right-handed shot D-man was what the Kings needed. They needed a left-handed shot, and they didn't take it. So, just if you're a Kings fan, you're left scratching your head a little bit. You're like, what are we doing? And they got a lot of quantity, which is good, I guess. Higher odds of someone turning out when you have a lot of picks. Just not a lot of quality, right? So nothing that can help out in the immediate future. Not that the Kings really need that, but they got an aging roster, so you got to think at some point somebody's got to break through and really help bolster the team. Quentin Byfield's going to need more help. Brant Clark's going to need more help. Brant Clark needs a defensive partner. Brant Clark's a right shot. He needed a left shot to help him out. He did not get that. That is unfortunate. So, B- for the Kings. Now moving on to the Sharks. The Sharks, another team. They had a great draft. They got Michael Misa with the 2nd overall pick. It helps. You know, Michael Misa, Will Smith, Macklin Salabrini. You look at a line like that, that is a dangerous line. It gets me excited to watch. I'm not a Sharks fan, but, you know, I'm all for just great hockey players, great young talent doing crazy, awesome things to help grow the game of hockey, and I think that's what they can do. They were able to address a lot of needs to help expedite their rebuild and continue it going strong. Like the Sharks, you better watch out. 3 years' time, this is a playoff team, and they will be hungry and chasing down that Stanley Cup in the not-too-distant future. The Seattle Kraken now. I give them a B+. You know, they got some guys that will really make a difference. Solid players. And it's kind of a story in the later rounds, like I guess I'm talking around 6, 7. They didn't really get anyone that really excites me, but the rest of the rounds, they did good. And I think Seattle, you know, some of these guys might be able to hop into the roster, not this season, but the following season, so that really helps them out. And that's why I give them a B+ overall. Seattle, you know, you did yourselves a really great job. Now moving on to the Vancouver Canucks. They got a C. Really forward-heavy class for them. They didn't really get any defensemen. Not sure if they really need defensemen, but it's just kind of like I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, and that's kind of what they did with a really forward-heavy class. A more evenly spread out forward to defenseman ratio would have been better. They didn't do that, which is why I give them a C. It's just they drafted in a style I just don't particularly like, so maybe I'm a little bit biased on this, but that's why I give them a C. Vegas, I give them a B+. They only had 4 picks, but they maximized it. I liked all 4 of their picks. They got 4 great players that excite me. Well done by Vegas, and I think, you know, Vegas has a dangerous roster already. They've always done a great job drafting. They develop guys pretty well, I would say. I just think that whole organization, the Vegas Golden Knights, since they've entered the NHL, literally it's ironic because it almost feels like everything they touch turns to gold. And I'm not just saying that, pun intended, because they're the Golden Knights. It's just how it shakes out. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of The Frozen Take, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.